I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
The parade had already begun when Prince William saw the silver insignia fixed above Harry's medals. His expression changed instantly. Without consulting the king, the master of ceremonies, or the senior officers waiting beside him, William lifted one hand and ordered the entire honors procession to stop. Music died. Marching feet froze. And in the silence that followed, every eye turned toward the emblem Prince Philip had once forbidden Harry from wearing. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Harry entered the grounds composed, but not relaxed. He kept his shoulders straight, his jaw tight, and his gaze fixed ahead as though discipline could shield him from scrutiny. The Honors Parade, a formal military ceremony recognizing service and loyalty to the crown, allowed no improvisation. Every medal, ribbon, position, and movement had been approved. That was why the silver insignia mattered. It belonged to Philip's private ceremonial order, a personal mark of trust rather than an ordinary decoration, and its use had been restricted before the Duke's death. William recognized it immediately. The prince felt disbelief first, then anger, then something more painful. To him, Harry had not simply broken protocol. His brother had taken a symbol bound to their grandfather's authority and carried it into the most controlled royal ceremony of the year without permission. Catherine saw the change in her husband before anyone else. She watched his face harden, his breathing slow, and his body turn away from his assigned place. Charles remained still on the reviewing platform. The king understood that one wrong response could turn a family dispute into a public fracture. Yet silence carried danger. Queen Camilla glanced toward the senior officers, but none moved. They were waiting for royal direction. They received it from William. The future king raised his gloved hand. The military band stopped in the middle of a note. Boots froze. Harry looked toward his brother and briefly placed his palm over the insignia. The gesture exposed everything before them all. He knew William had seen it. He knew the parade had been halted because of him. Slowly, Harry lowered his hand and let the emblem remain visible. William stepped forward. Catherine stayed behind him, tense but silent, while Charles watched both sons uncertain. The prince did not shout. That made the moment worse. He looked directly at Harry and asked, "Who gave you the right to wear that?" No one answered. But the insignia was only the visible cause of the crisis. Beneath it lay years of resentment between two brothers who no longer trusted each other's motives. For William, the emblem was not simply metal pinned to a uniform. It represented Prince Philip's discipline, his rules, and the private loyalty expected from every member of the family. For Harry, it carried something different, a final connection to the grandfather whose approval he had spent years trying to earn. When the brothers faced each other across the halted parade ground, they were not arguing over protocol. They were fighting over memory, legitimacy, and belonging. William held Harry's gaze and refused to soften. The insignia carried authority because it had never been an ordinary military decoration. It belonged to a private ceremonial order, a personal mark granted under strict conditions to show service, trust, and continued duty. To the prince, allowing anyone to wear it without permission would weaken every honor attached to the crown. Emotion could explain the choice. It could not excuse it. Harry felt the humiliation burn deeper with every second. He remembered long conversations with Philip about military discipline, sacrifice, and the danger of expecting respect without earning it. During private family gatherings, the Duke had often challenged him more sharply than the others, yet Harry had treasured that pressure because it made him feel seen. Now the same bond was being questioned before officers, relatives, and the brother who understood exactly what Philip had meant to him. Charles watched from the reviewing platform, his hands held tightly together. The king knew William had a duty to protect the ceremony, but he also saw Harry standing alone beneath the weight of public judgment. One son was defending the institution. The other believed the institution had already taken almost everything from him. If the monarch supported either man too quickly, the other might walk away for good. Catherine noticed something no one else appeared to catch. Harry kept glancing past Queen Camilla toward a senior equerry standing several steps behind her. An equerry was a royal officer responsible for helping senior family members manage ceremonial and military duties. The man avoided Harry's eyes, then looked down when William moved closer. Catherine felt a new fear. Someone inside the palace had known. Harry finally broke the silence through a low, direct reply heard by William and the nearest officers. He said the insignia had not been stolen, copied, or taken from a display. It had been delivered to him inside a sealed velvet case marked with an old Windsor inventory number. William's anger changed into suspicion. He ordered the honors parade adjourned immediately and demanded that the case be taken to Charles's private chamber. Harry did not resist. The equerry still refused to look up. As the royal party left the parade ground, one question followed them inside. Who had placed Philip's restricted emblem into Harry's hands? The crisis had not begun on the parade ground. It began 3 months earlier, inside Prince Philip's preserved study, when Harry was granted a private visit after requesting time alone with his grandfather's military collection. During that visit, a retired equerry opened a locked cabinet and revealed the insignia. What followed was a conversation never entered into the official record. A conversation that convinced Harry the emblem had been kept for him, even though Philip's written restrictions said otherwise. Harry had learned that several of his grandfather's personal objects were being reassigned before the honors parade. That news unsettled him. The preserved study remained under controlled access, meaning every letter, medal, and military object could only be handled with formal permission. Philip's private possessions were catalogued separately from crown property, which belonged to the monarchy, and family property, which could pass between relatives. The distinction mattered because the insignia was not simply available for sentimental inheritance. Sir Malcolm Harcourt met Harry alone and unlocked a cabinet that had remained sealed since the Duke's death. The retired equerry had served Philip during some of his final ceremonial years, and he understood every restriction attached to the collection. Yet when Harry saw the silver emblem resting beside an old photograph of himself with his grandfather, his composure broke. He touched the edge of the frame and asked why the two objects had been stored together. Sir Malcolm felt the danger immediately. He remembered Philip's strict instructions, but he also saw a grandson searching for proof that he had not been erased from the family's memory. According to the equerry's later documented account, Harry asked whether the placement meant the Duke had intended the insignia for him. Malcolm did not answer at first. Then he opened the velvet case and said, "He wanted you to earn the right to wear it again." Harry heard hope. The older man meant a condition. Philip had personally forbidden the emblem from being worn after Harry stepped away from senior royal service. The restriction could only be lifted through joint approval from the sovereign and the future king, the monarch who held present authority, and the heir responsible for protecting the crown's next chapter. No such approval had been granted. Sir Malcolm knew that. Still, moved by sympathy and his own interpretation of the Duke's final wishes, he allowed Harry to leave with the case. William learned the truth inside Charles's private chamber. His anger sharpened when the inventory record confirmed Malcolm had released the insignia without written authority. But the prince did not summon the retired equerry first. He turned toward Harry, ordered him into an adjoining room, and closed the door behind them. The parade had exposed the offense, but behind the closed chamber door, the brothers would finally confront what the insignia truly represented. There were no cameras inside the chamber, no soldiers standing between them, and no music to soften the silence. William placed the velvet case on the table and told Harry to remove the insignia. Harry refused. For several seconds, neither brother moved. Then William stepped closer and accused him of using Prince Philip's memory to force his way back into royal honor. Harry's answer turned the dispute into something painfully personal. William kept his voice low, but every word carried force. He explained that wearing the emblem in public could be seen as official restoration, meaning a formal return of status, duty, and recognition. Military officers and foreign guests would not view it as a private tribute. They would assume the crown had approved it. To the prince, that confusion was dangerous, because royal symbols only carried meaning when their rules were protected. Harry rejected that argument immediately. He said he had never claimed reinstatement, never announced a return, and never asked anyone to treat him as a working royal. He wore the insignia because Philip had shaped his military identity, and because the emblem represented one of the few parts of his past that still felt honest. Then, William pointed directly at it and said, "Take it off." Harry kept both hands at his sides. "You do not own his memory." The words struck harder than either brother expected. William accused him of turning grief into entitlement. Harry answered that his brother had spent years deciding who was allowed to belong, who was allowed to speak, and who was allowed to carry the family's history. The argument was no longer about ceremony. It was about exclusion, resentment, and every private wound they had refused to name. William opened a folder and placed a signed restriction beside the velvet case. The order specifically named Harry and stated that sentiment must never be confused with earned duty. It carried Philip's signature and made clear that the insignia could not be worn after Harry left senior service, unless both the sovereign and the heir approved its return. Harry did not retreat. He repeated Sir Malcolm's recorded account of a later conversation in which Philip had said the right could be earned again. To him, that verbal promise suggested the written restriction might not reflect the Duke's final intention. To William, it proved only that hope had been mistaken for permission. Raised voices carried beyond the chamber. Charles entered before either brother could continue. The king looked from the signed order to the empty velvet case, then to his sons. He did not immediately support William. Instead, he asked to see the full restriction and the documented record of Malcolm's last meeting with Philip. The brothers had reached an emotional breaking point, yet the final authority now belonged to a father, forced to choose between law, loyalty, and mercy. King Charles III sat with Philip's written restriction before him, and the forbidden insignia resting inches from his hand. William stood rigid beside the fireplace. Harry remained near the door, still wearing the empty pin where the emblem had been removed. The king understood that one decision could either defend the monarchy's rules or confirm Harry's belief that every road back had been sealed. He read the final paragraph twice, then quietly set the paper down. Charles carried the authority of the sovereign, the reigning monarch with the power to approve royal honors and ceremonial insignia. Yet Philip's private order had added another condition. Because the emblem represented future service to the crown, its restoration also required the consent of the heir. That meant the king could not simply overrule William without weakening the very system his father had created. William knew his decision to stop the parade could be defended. An unauthorized insignia had appeared during a formal military ceremony, and he had acted before that symbol could be mistaken for official approval. But the prince also knew the cost. He had corrected Harry in front of officers, relatives, and invited guests. What had begun as a breach of protocol had become a family humiliation no palace statement could erase. Charles looked down at Philip's signature and felt grief rise beneath his control. His father had always believed that honor without duty weakened the institution. To the Duke, symbols meant nothing if they were separated from sacrifice. The king remembered those words clearly, but memory did not make the decision easier. It made it more painful. Harry watched his father avoid his eyes. He understood what that silence meant. Charles was not simply judging whether a rule had been broken. He was weighing the stability of the monarchy against the shame of his own son. Harry had already lost his active role, his military appointments, and much of his public standing. Now even a private connection to Philip seemed to be slipping away. The written order removed all doubt. Harry had been forbidden to wear the insignia after leaving active royal service unless both the sovereign and the heir signed a formal restoration. No such document existed. Then Charles found the attached handwritten note. Philip had written that Harry might one day become worthy of receiving the honor again, but hope was not permission. Charles finally looked up. He ordered the emblem surrendered immediately. Harry said nothing, as the king placed it back inside the velvet case. Yet the monarch delayed any further punishment until Sir Malcolm Harcourt could be questioned about why he had ignored the restriction. The king had removed the insignia from Harry's uniform, but the deeper betrayal now pointed toward the man who had unlocked Philip's cabinet. When the chamber door opened, Harry emerged without the insignia. The small empty space above his medals said more than any palace statement could. Officers lowered their eyes. Camilla stepped aside. Catherine watched him walk past without speaking, while William remained inside with the king. Within minutes, the honors parade was formally cancelled, and a private family confrontation became a constitutional embarrassment that could no longer be hidden from those who had witnessed it. The palace moved quickly. A brief announcement said the parade had been postponed because of an unauthorized ceremonial item. That phrase meant an object worn during a royal event without formal approval. But everyone present already knew which item had caused the crisis. Senior military officials immediately began reviewing how the restricted insignia had passed through security and entered a state-controlled ceremony without challenge. Harry kept walking until he reached a quiet side corridor. He removed one glove, placed his hand against the stone ledge, and gripped it until his fingers tightened. The humiliation was no longer loud. It had settled into something colder. He had lost the emblem in front of soldiers who understood exactly what it represented, and he believed William had chosen the most public possible way to correct him. Catherine approached him alone. She spoke carefully, saying that William had acted to protect the ceremony and stop a private symbol from being mistaken for official restoration. Harry looked at her and answered, "Protection has become this family's word for punishment." The princess did not defend her husband again. She understood the wound beneath the accusation, even if she could not excuse what Harry had done. Sir Malcolm Harcourt faced questioning later that afternoon and gave a recorded account of his decision. He admitted releasing the insignia because he believed Philip's verbal hope carried greater moral weight than the old written prohibition. The retired equerry said he had acted from loyalty, not defiance, but his explanation only deepened the crisis. Compassion had crossed into disobedience. William then discovered something worse. A palace security note confirmed that Harry had informed one serving aide about the emblem the night before the parade. The aide had chosen not to warn the prince, the king, or the military organizers. That meant the breach was not simply one man's mistake. Someone inside the household had seen the danger and allowed it to continue. Evening brought no relief. Harry prepared to leave the palace without saying goodbye, but Charles stopped him at the private entrance. The king asked for one final conversation, with no William, no courtiers, and no advisors present. The institution had delivered its punishment. Now a father and son would decide whether anything personal could survive beneath it. Charles found Harry waiting beside the private entrance, with his coat already fastened. No equerry stood nearby. No secretary carried a folder. For once, there was no institutional barrier between father and son. The king held Philip's handwritten note, while Harry held nothing. Charles did not ask him to stay. Instead, he admitted that Philip's final words had been neither a full rejection nor a secret pardon. They had been a challenge Harry had misunderstood. Harry looked at his father but did not speak. The silence felt different now. It was no longer the cold silence of ceremony. It carried grief. Charles explained that Philip had intended the insignia to remain unavailable until Harry showed sustained service without title, uniform, or public recognition. Sustained service meant a long and consistent record of duty, not one dramatic act or emotional appeal. The emblem had always been tied to conduct, not blood alone. Harry lowered his eyes. He finally accepted that Sir Malcolm had offered hope, but not legal permission. The retired equerry had interpreted Philip's words through sympathy, while Harry had heard them through pain. By wearing the insignia before formal approval, he had turned a private longing into a public breach. He had wanted to honor his grandfather, but the choice had damaged the very meaning he believed he was protecting. Harry then told Charles the truth. He had worn it because he feared the family had erased every honorable part of his former life. The military years, the service, the pride, and the bond with Philip all seemed trapped behind locked doors. The king listened without interruption. Then he admitted that the family's silence had allowed bitterness to replace honest conversation. Every closed room had started to feel like permanent rejection. Charles unfolded the note and read the final handwritten line aloud. Philip had written that restoration could become possible only when Harry served, without first asking what title, place, or status he would receive in return. The words landed hard. They were not cruel, they were exact. The king offered no immediate restoration. He made no promise of a future ceremony. But he gave Harry one assurance: the insignia would not be destroyed, reassigned, or displayed as a trophy of defeat. It would remain sealed in its velvet case until the condition attached to it had genuinely been met. Harry accepted the decision. He left without the emblem, but not in anger. Before departing, he agreed to release a joint statement, accepting responsibility for wearing it without approval. By morning, the argument inside the palace would belong to the world, and one image would define the meaning of the entire crisis. At sunrise, one photograph appeared across Britain: William with his hand raised, the soldiers frozen behind him, and Harry standing alone with Philip's insignia visible above his medals. The image needed no headline, yet every newspaper supplied one. Some saw a future king defending the rules. Others saw a younger brother publicly stripped of dignity. But the most powerful reaction came outside Windsor, where silence turned into a divided chorus of anger and support. Broadcasters framed the crisis as an unprecedented clash between personal remembrance and the monarchy's controlled system of honors. That system governed who could wear royal medals, insignia, and ceremonial symbols, ensuring that each one reflected approved service rather than private emotion. The palace then confirmed through a written statement that Harry had worn the restricted emblem without formal authorization, and that it had been returned to the royal collection's private custody. William watched the morning coverage beside Catherine and remained silent longer than usual. The prince had expected criticism, but he looked unsettled when commentators accused him of humiliating his brother instead of correcting him privately. The princess reminded him that the parade had already been underway, and that delay could have made the insignia appear officially approved. Still, William could not ignore the image of Harry standing alone after his raised hand stopped everything. Harry read the same reports in private. The loss of the emblem still hurt, but anger no longer controlled him. He refused requests for a retaliatory interview and instructed his representatives not to challenge Philip's written restriction. That choice mattered. A public attack on William could have transformed a painful family dispute into another open war. But Harry had finally decided that defending his grandfather's memory required accepting the truth. One newspaper captured the division more sharply than all the others. Its front page showed the frozen parade beneath the words, "The hand that stopped a brother." William's single gesture became the symbol of the entire crisis. Duty to some, cruelty to others. Outside Windsor's Henry Gate, the split became personal. One veteran placed a small wreath, carrying the words, "Honor is service." Nearby, another man held a sign declaring, "Memory belongs to family." Neither message erased the other. Together, they showed why the nation could not agree on who had been wronged most. Before noon, the joint statement was released. Harry admitted he had worn the insignia without the required permission. while William expressed regret that the correction had unfolded publicly. That admission removed the threat of another bitter battle. The public had delivered its arguments, but the final meaning of the halted parade would come from what William and Harry chose to say together. The statement carried no accusation, no excuse, and no promise of immediate reconciliation. Harry acknowledged that he had worn Prince Philip's insignia without the required approval. William confirmed that stopping the parade had been necessary, but expressed regret that the correction unfolded before soldiers, family members, and the public. For the first time in years, both brothers accepted responsibility in the same moment. The insignia had divided them, but the truth prevented it from destroying them completely. The honors parade was rescheduled without Harry taking part. The ceremony, a formal military event recognizing service to the crown, continued under the rules William had defended from the beginning. The prince watched it proceed with order restored, yet there was no sense of victory. The empty place where his brother might have stood reminded him that protecting tradition had come with a deeply personal cost. Philip's insignia was sealed inside its original velvet case and returned to the restricted collection, a group of royal objects kept under special control because they cannot be freely worn, gifted, or displayed. The emblem remained neither granted nor permanently denied. Charles ordered that it stay untouched until the condition attached to it had truly been met. William later spoke privately with Catherine. He told her that halting the parade had protected the meaning of honor, but he also admitted that seeing Harry standing alone would remain one of his most painful memories. The princess understood the conflict. Her husband had acted as the future king, yet he would remember the moment as a brother. Harry left Windsor saddened but calmer. He no longer believed the emblem could prove his bond with Philip. That connection existed in memory, service, and loss, not in a piece of silver he had not regained the right to wear. His mistake had been real, but so had the pain behind it. Charles then issued a formal ruling on Sir Malcolm Harcourt. The king cleared the retired equerry of malicious intent after reviewing his recorded testimony, but removed his access to restricted royal collections. Compassion explained the decision. It did not erase responsibility. William walked Harry to the outer door. There was no dramatic embrace, and no sudden promise that everything had been repaired. Harry paused and said, "Next time, speak to me before you raise your hand." The prince answered, "Next time, speak to me before you wear it." That exchange became the true verdict. Royal honor could not survive as decoration alone. William defended the institution. Harry faced the consequences of acting from pain. Charles protected the possibility of redemption without weakening Philip's command. The monarchy emerged wounded but clearer. Memory may inspire, family may forgive, but honor must still be earned through service. The parade resumed. The insignia returned to its case, and the brothers walked away knowing exactly what had been lost, and what could still, one day, be earned. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.